Welcome to episode 71 of the Relationship Marketing Podcast with Cody B. Today's guest is Christopher Kai. Christopher Kai is the founder and CEO of the Mathen Group, a Beverly Hills-based leadership training firm. He is the world's leading authority in story-based leadership, a Fortune 100 global speaker, #1 global best-selling author, and founder of GPS, the premier speaker training program in the world with clients in 100 cities, 24 countries, and 5 continents. He is a former business strategist and executive speechwriter at American Express. Elon Musk once exclaimed during an interview, "Wow, you really know a lot." His clients include Google, American Express, Discover, New York Life, Merrill Lynch, Farmers Insurance, Bank of America, and the U.S. Consulate. He has authored 5 books and has been featured on CNN, ABC News, Huffington Post, BuzzFeed, Fast Company, and Forbes. His 4 main keynotes are about #1, story-based leadership, #2, team building, #3, sales mastery, and #4, connection, communication, and persuasion. He has also given keynotes for colleges, universities, and nonprofits. All of his keynotes are based on his 20 years of global experience and exhaustive research. Outside of his business, he founded Mondays at the Mission, the only homeless youth program of its kind in the world at Union Rescue Mission, the largest private shelter in the U.S. They have helped thousands of homeless students stay in school, find jobs, and attend college. Their esteemed speakers list include Grammy and Oscar winners, FBI agents, Navy SEALs, Olympians, and astronaut Buzz Aldrin, world record-holding swimmer Diana Nyad, and business visionary Elon Musk. And now, Cody B.
Hello, everybody. This is Cody Bateman. Welcome to a brand new episode of our Relationship Marketing Podcast. Super excited to do these shows each and every week. Super excited about our guests we have on today, but you know how I am. I like to always give a shout out to all of you prior to bringing on our guests. You've already heard his bio. I'm sure you're all chomping at the bit to listen to this guy. And I'm sure excited to interview him. So we're going to get to him in just a second. But prior to doing that, just a quick reminder to everybody, appreciate all that you're doing out there to help people through this thing called kindness. That's what we're about, is helping people through kindness, acting on our promptings to reach out in kindness to people in our personal life and our business. You, the listeners, are doing that all over the world. You're doing that all over the world, and we're making a difference all over the world. And the byproduct of that is incredible relationship marketing programs, great referral business, you name it. If you're nice to people, great things happen. What you send out is what comes back to you. That's what the Relationship Marketing Podcast is all about. It's about the first word, relationship, way more than the second word. If you take care of relationship, the second word, marketing, takes care of itself. So again, thank you, all of you, for your commitment and coming on and listening week after week. So we have the one and only Christopher Kai, the founder and CEO of the Mathen Group. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing well, given the circumstances, but happy to be here, Cody.
Yeah, we're all in unique circumstances right now, and you're down in the thick of things there. So you're based out of Beverly Hills, right?
Yeah, my business is based in Beverly Hills. I'm currently actually in Miami right now, so I'm on the East Coast right now.
All right. So what's the pandemic like in Beverly Hills and in Miami? What's it like right now?
Quite polar opposites in that California, the governor and the mayor were quite quick to lock down the entire city in the state, whereas the governor in Florida, he was a little bit more waiting on things. But the cases, I think, aren't as bad on both sides of the state, so that's a good thing.
So, you're one of those big speaker guys. You go out, do a lot of speaking, change people's lives in a lot of different ways. Love your content. I've had a chance to be on your website and see some of the stuff that you have. I've not had the chance to read your book. By the way, Big Game Hunting. Those of you watching us on YouTube will see behind Christopher, he's got that book right behind him there, Big Game Hunting, Networking with Billionaires, Executives, and Celebrities. That is available right now. You can go get it. I understand you got a couple of new books you're coming out with real soon.
Yeah, I have a whole bunch of books coming out, but right now my focus is really on you talk about relationships, so I travel the world giving speeches. Of course, right now I'm not, but the one thing I'm doing now really is building up my, what I call a GPS speaker training program, where I'm really teaching and helping people either launch their speaking careers, or if they're already speakers, how do you elevate that? So even in what we're going through now, we give virtual talks now, and I offer them the same skill sets that a speaker would have, whether you're an online coach or a speaker. It still is about your brand, about your story, how do you build relationships based on science and storytelling. So it's really about how you connect better with your clients and yourself.
So give me an example of a client. Like, what's a typical client for you?
So we've literally had clients ranging from age 20 to 77, literally. So let's say a 20-year-old client named Shazad, she's in Sweden. She wants to be a speaker, and you might think, well, what does a 20-year-old do or know what to do to speak on that? So with her, it was more about understanding what is she good at. And in her case, she's very good at social media. She's helped me get clients on social media. So for her, she ended up helping her clients understand how to communicate and market to millennials. So that's more on the super young side. She ended up securing a speech at IKEA and got paid $4,000. You have another client named Dragana, who's more in her 30s, and she was very petrified even to step on stage. So we just started with a Facebook Live. She had 2,400 views. And within a year, she was speaking in front of 300 people. In 2 years, she was at a global conference, and now she's a transformational coach. And on the way other end, I shouldn't say way other end, but as an older person, we had a client named Keith who's built 50 companies in the last 30 years, raised $500 million. And for him, it was more about helping him understand how to communicate stories, where in his case, he literally had a shoebox of receipts for one of his clients. And his client said, Keith, I want you to help me raise money. And based on a shoebox of receipts, Keith was able to raise millions of dollars from a shoebox of receipts. So for his type of speech topic, it was more about how do you think inside the box? So some of it's more about branding, some of it's about understanding what their speech topic is, and some of it's just like throwing them in the deep end and say, hey, just do it. Speak wherever you are, whether it's online, LinkedIn, social media, Facebook. And so my thing isn't just about sharing stories. It's like, how do you actually create a business from it? How do you turn your story into an actual speaking business? I've been doing this for 20 years. And I wish I knew this, because from a kid that grew up in Woodside, Queens, New York, 4 miles east of Manhattan, no money, no access, no connections, bullied as a kid for being really short, teased and punished for talking too much in class. My mom's a former school teacher. So for me to actually get paid and to be considered an authority and to travel the world, sharing stage with the presidents, it's like, it's a dream come true. So knowing that I have this gift and this awareness, I want to teach and help as many people as possible with this awareness of how do you use your platform and your brand to really connect with people on a global scale.
So it's interesting to me that you, obviously you know what you're doing with this story-based leadership. You practice what you preach, because in answering a question, you made sure that you told your story. I mean, you told your story, an abbreviated version of your story. And I know your story because I read it on your website about being bullied as a kid and being super short. I related to that. I was short growing up too. So I kind of related with some of the things you were saying in there. And, but it's interesting. And it just for all of our listeners, just think about what Christopher just did. In answering a question completely off topic to telling your story, he told his story. And you did the abbreviated version. I'm sure that comes from lots and lots of seat time, lots of practice. You probably do that every time you get interviewed, right?
I do, because they always ask me, what do I do? And by the way, I teach my clients how to do the same thing, meaning like you have to have your personal story down, your professional story, and your client story. A lot of people don't include their client story. And if you don't include your client story, why should they believe you? If you say you're a coach or speaker or an advisor or trainer, well, how are you helping people if you're not even sharing with them? Because everyone can say what they want, right? But it's based on science, where McKinsey studied 20,000 customers across the world. And they found that 31% of success in sales is based solely on what they call consumer-driven marketing, which are testimonials, which are a Yelp review when you go to a restaurant. You can go to a restaurant menu and website is like, oh, it looks very flashy, really nice. But if you go to a Yelp review and it's like 2 stars, am I going to take you out to the restaurant, Cody? No.
Right. So I'm a jokester, so I'm just going to preface this. I like to joke around with people.
That's
and
great.
We didn't get a chance to create a lot of dialogue prior to this, but I'm going to joke with you anyway.
Sounds great. I love jokes.
I love stats. I think I use stats all the time too. I was reading in your deal, it said something like increase something by 74% with proper storytelling or something like that.
Yeah.
How did you come up with 74%? Like, how do you come up with that? Where does that come from?
It's literally from the same McKinsey survey where they talked about how a direct interaction and this consumer driven marketing, those are the percentages. So the actual direct interaction was about 40%. And then the actual consumer driven marketing, so you add up the two, you have 74%. Because I'm all about thin slicing, right? People hire me. That was a Discover Card company. That's a multi-billion-dollar company. They're not here to waste time and spend money on keynote speakers where I'm there for 45 minutes, right? So it's about what did I learn from American Express? What did I learn from speaking at Google? What did I learn from 20 years of experience streamlined into a 45-minute speech? Because that's the thing about corporate speaking. It's not just about my cool hair as much as I like your cool glasses, right? It's about what quantifiable ways based on research and experience can they use to literally build up their sales team so they can be more effective. Because frankly, the whole direct interaction, the first thing I said, Cody, in my speech was, what does direct interaction even mean now? Is it on a Zoom call? Is it in person? Is it on the phone? Well, did you know that just based on an interface, a face-to-face interface, you have a 35% better chance of communicating better? That's not from McKinsey, that's from MIT Human Dynamics Laboratory, you know? So I'm a big on research because I don't want to just share my opinion. I'm like, no, if McKinsey, which is like the Harvard of consulting, studies tens of thousands of people, or MIT studies more, it just allows us as business owners, as entrepreneurs to be more defined with how we communicate because I want to help as many people as possible. So I can read a book about one person's experience, but if I can read a study that has 20,000 data points, I'd rather read that 20,000 data point and then I test it by there, right? I'm like, okay, if I don't share testimonial, is it as engaging? And really, we live in a world that we're so just distracted where if I don't share these points, how can they really understand why it's important? Then I break down, you know, why that is the case. But again, direct interaction, what does that even mean now? Is it a text message? Is it an email? And I always say, look, if you want to build relationships, pick up the phone. Don't just send the email. The easiest thing is to send a text or email. So the direct interaction, I was just reminding all that a direct interaction has changed massively even in the last 5 years. And I encourage people to have what we're doing, a face-to-face conversation where you can look at me in the eyes, I can look at you, you can see my body language, but we're not doing that as much. It's so easy just to pick up the phone or not even think about it. It's like, hey, Cody, great meeting you. It's like, I don't know how you're feeling. I don't know what you're thinking. I don't know how you're engaging right now, but if you at least have interaction, it's actual direct interaction, then you just have more of a human contact. And I dive into the science of the actual happy chemicals that go on when you're actually smiling, you know, so I go deep with this stuff.
So I've got this book, Power of Human Connection. I've had a chance to see it. This kind of tells our story a little bit, and it kind of goes in with what you were saying is in today's day and age, you got to do some extra things to create relationship. One of the big things that we do is we're in the greeting card business, and we believe wholeheartedly in sending tangible, heartfelt greeting cards to people in your business and personal life. Why is that important? I think it's the same thing as what you're saying. It's important to pick up the phone and call somebody and engage in a story, engage in your story, listen to their story, and create connection. That's what that book's all about. Same thing in a card, you know, it's a tangible, real greeting card in the mail with a heartfelt message where somebody acted on a prompting to reach out in kindness to somebody. When you receive that in the mail, you touch it, you feel it, you open it, you smell it. All your senses are being used. And that's a means of creating connection with people today and a means of telling your story. So we're kind of on the same page. That's why I was really excited to interview you today, because I've heard you, you know, talk about all these things. And listen, you've been around, man. I mean, you've worked with some big level people and, you know, Elon Musk and all these big names. And it's pretty impressive. It's pretty cool, some of the stuff that you've been able to do. Now, it says that you're the leading authority on story-based leadership. Now, a lot of our listeners are like, I didn't even know story-based leadership was a thing, you know? So talk to us a little bit about that. What is story-based leadership?
It's really, I train leaders on how to use their story as a basis for their success. So as an example of Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs, people don't usually know the story, but like in the mid 1990s, after he gets booted out of Apple, he literally gets fired from his job, right? That he created. And so he comes back in the mid to late 90s. Apple is almost near bankruptcy, which most people don't know. He hires a company called Shy Day, which creates this cool Think Different campaign, but he models Nike, where Nike, it's about an emotional appeal. How can Nike create this emotional appeal about when you see a Michael Jordan or LeBron James or Kobe Bryant, it's like, oh, I feel like I got to do more. I got to just do more, right? So what Steve Jobs does, he wants to create this story of how when you pick up an iPhone, an iPad, an iTunes, you have this emotional connection. So what I do is break down a Steve Jobs story or a Howard Schultz story or a Jeff Bezos story about companies, business owners that have literally built businesses around the world, and break down why it works, why it's so powerful based on science, because everything's a story. You know, so my thing is when I see leaders, they want to communicate. A lot of leaders, frankly, are horrible communicators, Cody. They're not trained to be communicators. I mean, even Elon Musk, frankly, he's not the best communicator, but he's very genuine. But if you look at like a Richard Branson, not the best communicator, but it doesn't matter because he's Richard Branson, right? So what I do is really train people on understanding how to use their story to inspire people, as Steve Jobs did with his personal story, where literally when John Scully, who's a former executive at PepsiCo, he asked him at one point, he's like, hey, do you want to keep selling sugar water or do you want to change the world? So he paints this picture of like, hey, come join our team. We're changing the world. We're creating these products. It's not just a product. You're going to be cool. And we really are thinking different, you know? So when I teach leaders, whether in sales or building better teams or being better leaders, whether in their company, their commerce, or their country, is that you have to inspire people. Because you don't engage people if you don't inspire them, especially now, again, we're so quite bored. And that term, story-based leadership, I created myself. Because when I was thinking, okay, I want to talk about leadership, but what is my brand? So I started Googling, okay, you know, purpose-driven leadership, Rick Warren has. I think there's intentional leadership, but stories are my thing. You know, whether being a speaker or teaching other people how to use their stories, I'm, oh, this is cool. I'm going to call it story-based leadership. And it's so convincing sometimes. They're like, wow, you're really the leading authority. And like, well, I actually created the term. So it's just kind of funny that people ask me that.
Okay, so you're known for coaching speakers. You have this.
Well, that's one online program, but what I'm known for on the speaking world is like, you know, I give keynote speeches on leadership, team building, sales, and how to build better relationships, you know, but on the online training. Yeah.
Here's my question. So, this is important for me and what we're doing internally. So I'm going to ask you a very detailed question here. I've heard you talk about story-based presentations, story-based speaking, and of course, generally you talk about story-based leadership. I want our listeners to hear you answer the question, what is the difference? What's the difference between a story-based presentation or speech versus story-based leadership? What is the difference there? Or is there a difference?
Well, the thread is the same, meaning if I'm using a presentation to share a story about leadership, I'll do that. But I can use the same presentation to do story-based sales, you know? So for me, the story is really the thread that threads all the conversations, because ultimately you have a story, Cody. I have a story. Your company has a story. Your clients have a story. So for me, the difference is really just the end result of who my audience is. But I really believe at the core level, if my goal in life is to connect people, communicate better with people, to really have their lives be a gift to the world, which is why I always say your story is a gift to the world, because why are we here? We're here to serve. So whether I'm speaking on a stage for corporations that they want to make more money, I get that. But the undertone is really, I want to serve people with my story to hopefully inspire others as other people that have come before me or around me share their story. So it's not necessarily different. It's just like a presentation is a format that I use to share a story. And then story-based leadership is just one topic I share stories about, but I've also used stories to share how do you get more sales. I've used stories to share how to communicate better with teams. So though the top line topics are different, the bottom line base is still the same in terms of how do we connect better.
Yeah, that's really good stuff. The reason I asked the question is because, you know, like you, I do have a story. You know, I don't know if you've heard my story before, but I'll give you my 10-second version of mine. A long time ago, I had a prompting that I needed to go say bye to my brother, Chris, before I moved away from home. And I ignored that prompting. We moved away, and a couple of months later, he unexpectedly passed away in an accident. He was only 29 years old when he died. And so when I got that news, all I could think of is I ignored this prompting to say bye to my brother, Chris. I'd never have the chance to do that again. So I made a vow at that point to him and to myself that when I had a prompting to reach out and kind to somebody, I would act. And I try to do all I can to help as many people as I can do the same. And that's my story. That's where the mission to send out cards started. Send out cards is all about helping people act on their promptings to reach out in kindness to others. Never miss that opportunity. We have mechanisms and systems in place to make sure you never, ever miss that opportunity. Now, it's in all my speeches, of course. It's in my books. It's in everything. It's all in presentation format, but it's also in the boardroom. Mm-hmm. It's everywhere. Like that story is everywhere. Everything we manage is based on that story. Every decision we make is based on that story. You know, our premier thing that we do at Send Out Cards is help millions of people to act on their promptings. That's what we do. So everything is based on that one story. And I've learned that, you know, by listening. Well, I've learned that by experience, also by listening to some of the stuff you had on your websites and whatnot. You know, you can carry your message into the core of every single leadership thing you do. And that's why I love what you're doing, because you're helping people to define their stories. Mm-hmm. And once you
craft, build, amplify. Yeah. And again, Cody, is it a surprise that I remember your story months later? I don't know who you are, right? But that's a powerful story.
Right.
You know, it's not a surprise that, let's say my mother passed away about 5 months ago, and I was in Australia, and I got like the top ratings of the whole conference. And this woman who's like an 18-year veteran event management said, you know, Christopher, you're the best presenter I've seen in the last 18 years. And it was so raw and real. She didn't know at the time that it was so raw and real, because I literally was the first time I ever shared the fact that my mother passed. And I don't like sharing certain personal things, you know, because my parents were not very public people, but since I am, I'm very careful because it's out of respect, you know. But after she passed, I wasn't like happy or excited. But this is a big gig in Australia, right? So I said, you know what? If you want to elevate your relationships, you share stories. And I want to be an example of sharing stories. And frankly, I don't want to share that story, to be blunt, because I was almost tearing up. But when she had that response, I'm like, wow, that's powerful, because they can tell it was real and raw, because it's literally the first time I shared that. But again, with your brother, you had a loss. With my mother, who just passed away 6 months ago, you know? So those are so deep and visceral. And the beauty of you and I and our stories, it's real. People now want real, authentic stories. And that's frankly the best compliment I ever get. Like, I don't care if they think, oh yeah, it's cool, Elon Musk. Like, a lot of stuff I do is marketing, kind of catch their attention, right? But at the core, even my book, by the way, this book, if people read it, even the vegetarians and the vegans, it's like the main thing to even meet those people is to help people. And so those that actually take the time to read it, they'll know the single best reason to meet those people of influence is to give back. And so your story was powerful and is powerful and will always be powerful, because it's deeply personal to you, as my mother is to me. When people see that, but more importantly, feel it, Cody, they're like, wow, I want to be around Cody. I want to learn from Cody. And that's why I'm so passionate, because in the business world, it can be very sanitized and very just glossed over. And I will tell people about insecurities that I have as a human being, or I'll talk to people about how the company name, Maven Group, Maven is an acronym for Mondays at the Mission, which is actually a volunteer program I created at a homeless shelter in LA 10 years ago, where these kids are homeless. They don't have a bed, they don't have a pillow, they've been abused, they've been physically hurt. And so though I'm a capitalist, an entrepreneur, I'm an executive, I want everyone to know, oh, why is your company called Maven? Oh, let me share this story. Because it's so deeply rooted in me. I don't care if I'm a capitalist, I get it, but it's like, I want them to know my morals, my values, and the why I'm here. And when that literally is why I call my company, then you know where my values are placed. And again, sometimes they're like, wow, that's pretty deep, Chris. Well, yeah, because I'm a deep guy, but it's about service, about self. It's one thing to volunteer for a day or a week, but I started that 10 years ago at a shelter in the worst part of LA, because I want to always lead by example. Okay. I'm not perfect by any means, but if things about, which by the way, this picture of Elon Musk is when he came to the shelter. And so I want to be that guy that leads by example, where why would a man at his stature, his ability, and his brilliance come to the worst part of town to share a story? Well, I was insistent, hey, Elon, your story can inspire kids, because these kids can literally die that day. And so it comes by, you know, but again, even your story, I'm pretty sure you've saved some lives in your life, Cody. You know, if you're doing this for so long, and I've been grateful enough to say I have saved some life, not out of boastfulness, because again, if you're daring and courageous enough to be vulnerable and to share your story, you connect with people. So then someone else watching this Zoom call, watching this podcast might know that, you know what, they're not alone. my mother just passed away. And the interesting about grief, as you might know, Cody, is so fascinating, where I literally sent the email out sharing a video about my mother passing on her birthday. And we're in such a politicized world where this woman emailed me back and said, fake news, angry news, blah, blah, blah. Like, it was like so politicized, where I said, hey, we're going through some challenges now. So clearly she probably doesn't believe in it, which is fine, right? Again, everyone has their opinion. But I literally emailed her back and said, it seems like you have a lot of anger. I was just sharing a story about my mother. And I said, wow. Because again, she clearly didn't, the very title said something about like, you know, my mother's passing and what it taught me, like, you know, what matters most.
Yeah.
But she didn't read that. She just saw, you know, we're going through the crisis, and it just lit her up.
Oh,
but
wow.
how unfortunate is that this woman was so just angry that all I'm doing is sharing a story about my mother. And again, she doesn't have to grieve me, because even going back to the whole public-private, I said, you know what? If I share this video, will it help someone else that might have grieved or might be grieving? Because again, I don't like sharing this stuff, by the way. I mean, because it's still personal, but it was a birthday. I was feeling bad. What's the worst case scenario of this whole thing? Someone dies. Well, guess what? My mother did die. So am I feeling good? No, I'm not at all. But I want to, again, lead by example, where this woman unfortunately had a very negative response, even though just sharing a story about my mother's death, focus on what matters most. That was literally the title. And it's not politicized at all. It's just a human being sharing his story, just as you share with your brother. And I'll remember you forever, whether we meet again or not. It doesn't matter, but it's like so deep and visceral that imagine a world, Cody, where we're open enough to share our stories. I don't know why people don't, but everywhere I go, you know?
Yeah. Well, I imagine that every single day. Trust me, I do. We are listening to Christopher Kai, founder and CEO of the Matham Group. He is the author of the best-selling book, Big Game Hunting, Networking with Billionaires, Executives, and Celebrities. I want to close the show. I know that we're limited on time today, and I want to close the show coming back to your Mondays at the Mission. You mentioned the Mondays at the Mission is the charity that you started, which I love. That's another similarity we have. You know, we have a charity called the McCabe Foundation, where we help inner city kids. So I think that's an appropriate way to close, especially in the world that we're living in today, and the importance of serving our communities and reaching out and helping people. What is the story behind Mondays at the Mission? Why is it so important to you to help homeless youths, you know, and the mission that you do there?
Yeah, the why is a little girl named Hannah, who's 8 years old, who I met on September 2nd, 2010. I've never been to that area, by the way. Skid Row area, it's like the worst part of town in LA, where it has the heaviest concentration of homelessness in the country. And so just 2 blocks away, there are cool bars in an area called Japantown, but I've never been to a homeless shelter. So I walk in there September 2nd. Now, mind you, this is the largest shelter of its kind in the country. They serve 1,200 people a night, men, women, and kids. It's a 225,000 square foot shelter. It's a massive shelter. So I walk in there just blown away by this massive thing, because it doesn't really feel like a homeless shelter, you know? And when I get to the 3rd floor, I walk into the room with Andy Bales, who's the CEO. And apparently at that time, from 5 to 6, it's kids' time. And so all these kids are running around. Now, mind you, right outside, there's pimps and prostitutes and drug dealers and drug addicts and pedophiles, rapists and murderers. And I wish I was being hyperbolic, but I'm not. And yet I see this little girl named Hannah runs up to me. He's like, do you want to play jump rope?
Oh.
And I'm like, sure, Hannah. And again, I'm playing jump rope with this girl. Now, mind you, again, I wasn't doing very well 10 years ago financially. I was having a very hard time with my business. I was actually a singer-songwriter. So again, people might say, oh, you know, Cody, you're successful. Christopher, you're successful. I don't have time. Like, no. 10 years ago, it wasn't how I was now. So I remind people that at that time, I needed to serve. I was feeling really down. One of my friends almost went to jail. So a lot of personal things are going on. But when I saw an 8-year-old girl who's homeless with this beautiful smile on her face, asking one question, even though her neighbors are criminals, and not even judging them, it's just a lot of them have had poor circumstances. But when she asked me a simple question, I'm like, all right, I got to do something. Gandhi once said, we must be the change we wish to see in the world. 5 days later, even though, again, I didn't have the time, I was busy, someone else can do the work. I'm like, no, I was really moved. And like all things, if you don't act like what you're saying with your personal life, you're going to forget it. 5 days later, I come back on September 2nd, I start teaching these career and life skill classes for teenagers, because I prefer working with teenagers. 10 years later, we're the only homeless program of its kind in the world, where we've had over 350 speakers from astronauts, Navy SEALs, Grammy winners, Buzz Aldrin, Elon Musk, to come share their story to inspire these kids to know that, you know what, they matter. why can you and I have this amazing conversation when these kids, to no fault of their own, cannot? So when I saw this young girl, it just blew my mind that maybe I was a bit naive, frankly. I was like, wow, there are homeless kids. I never thought about that. The homeless people I remember from New York, they're aggressive and they smell, and maybe they're, I had all stereotypical things in my mind. But as soon as I saw all these kids running around, especially Hannah, it just really tore me to the core, where I said I had to do something. And now again, I can't imagine, it's been 10 years now. We've had kids go on to college and get jobs. One kid was, he's not even a kid now, he got on the Ellen show. So it's gratifying to know that. I always say, volunteer 1 hour a week. You volunteer 1 hour a week in whatever cause you decide to believe in. That's less than 99%, less than 1% of your time, but you'll be amazed at how much change you can do, but also your own life will be changed with 99% of other things. So I always keep it simple. Like, look, you might not want to commit to how much time I committed, or you building a business as I have, but like, we can all volunteer 1 hour a week. And that's what I always hold to. Yeah,
that's really, really good stuff. Well, we call that prompting around here. You acted on a prompt. You had this experience with that little girl, and you acted on a prompting to start a philanthropy. That's an amazing story. Absolutely love it, and love what you're doing for these kids throughout the world. And so we're listening to Christopher Kai. So grateful for the time that you've spent with us today. I know that you're on a tight schedule. You're out changing the world, my friend, and we appreciate your service to our communities and to our world. Keep doing what you're doing, would you? Keep fighting the good fight, and we'll keep doing it here as well. We're big fans and appreciate all that you do.
Thank you, Cody. Keep sharing your story.
Thank you. So there you have it, everybody. We appreciate you being on with us today. And again, please stay tuned. We'll keep bringing them on. We're going to go out and change the world by being kind to other people. Take care, everybody.
Bye, Cody.
Have enjoyed this episode of the Relationship Marketing Podcast with Cody B. Be sure to subscribe to the show and leave a review so that together we can get this message, The Power of Human Connection, out to the world. You can find Cody's new book, The Power of Human Connection, on Amazon or the Send Out Cards gift store.